Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is just my stupid opinion. So, today, for this episode, we're back on track talking more about what we're really about here at Just My Stupid Opinion. My last episode was a departure from what I normally do, and I like doing episodes like that every now and then. But we're back at it today. We got a few different stories. It wasn't even intentional, but a couple of them, I guess, really are covering. We're going to be talking about political correctness today in these stories. Then we're going to move on and go to a little more local, and we're going to be talking about the recent Quebec Bill 68, which is not allowing any head coverings in public. So we're going to cover that, and then finally we're going to end off with talking about Trump and the drone strikes and the body count that have come along with it. So we got a couple interesting stories today. And the first one we're going to talk to as we get into our bit about political correctness comes from right here in the capital, my hometown of Ottawa. And what ended up happening was an Ottawa man was found not guilty of sexual assault because he thought he could have sex with his wife. This is an article that came out of the Ottawa Citizen, and it is written by Andrew Duffy. And what it says is an Ottawa man has been found not guilty of sexually assaulting his wife because, in his honest belief, that he had the right to have intercourse with her whenever he wanted. In a written ruling, Ontario Superior Court Justice Robert Smith said the Crown failed to prove that the accused had formed the required criminal intent, mens rea, to sexually assault his wife in 2002. Justice Robert Smith said in a quote, he said, "I find that the accused probably had sex with his wife on many occasions without her specific consent, as both he and she believe that he had the right to do so." However, the judge ruled that the man was not guilty of sexual assault because the Crown had failed to establish that he knew his behaviors was, in fact, criminal. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but I don't believe that you have to prove that the person believed what they were doing is criminal. You just had to prove that a law had been broken. I could be completely wrong on this. Obviously, you have to have intent in the crime in order to be found guilty on it. But there's no doubt that he had sex with his wife on multiple occasions without her consent. That is all you need to know when making a rape charge, is that the intercourse happened, the sexual assault happened, and that there was not consent on both sides. So this should be a cut and dry case. But instead, he says that they have not proved that the person, that the criminal, knew that his intent was wrong. The other problem with this is now the judge has made it a defense, a legal defense, that if you believe that having sex with your wife without her consent is not inappropriate, they've given a legal defense that you should not be charged on rape charges. It sounds ridiculous, but there are many times in court where a lawyer will point to a previous case and how a judge has ruled on that case in order to sway favor in how they want the judge to proceed in this case, because the law would require consistency. So now that this case was ruled not guilty, that means other defendants up against similar charges in a similar situation can now point to this case and say that, well, this individual was in the same boat. He didn't believe what he did was wrong. He didn't believe that forcing sex on his wife was wrong, that she was not allowed to withhold sex from him. And in this case, they happen to rule in favor of the defendant. So everyone's going to point to this as the way in the future a judge should rule. What really bugs me about this is I've seen how all over the world in the West, since the migrant crisis of 2015, defenses people use in court, some of the immigrants that commit crimes and are taken to court over it, they use that their own laws or their own belief systems justify one thing, so they don't have to follow the specific laws of that country. Now, I'm not saying that it works all the time. There's plenty of times where they make this defense. But, the court will rule that they still broke their laws, so they got to be punished for it. But the fact there are consistent court cases where people try and justify this and say that, well, I believe under Islamic law that I cannot rape my wife, so I therefore should not be forced to follow your law. I should be forced to follow Islamic law, which is really a lot of defenses that have been used, that Islamic law should supersede the law of man. So that way, even if they're in Switzerland, they believe that Islamic law should trump Swiss law. Or if they're in America or Canada, that Islamic law should trump the local laws. So I don't like to see it when somebody's culture and what they believe is being used as an actual legal defense now to justify the raping of their wife. The article goes on to say that the man was part of an arranged marriage in Gaza. His wife, a Palestinian who grew up in Kuwait, lived in Ottawa, and the family settled in this city. She justified that during the marriage, she considered it her obligation to have sex with her husband. Often, she told the court, she did not consent, but they both believed that it was his right. The couple eventually split in 2013. The court heard that it was during a dispute over child access, after speaking to a police officer, that the woman came to understand she had the right to refuse sexual relations with her husband. She subsequently complained to Ottawa police about a 2002 incident. The husband denied ever having sexual relations with his wife without her consent, and specifically denied that the incident that led to the charges. His wife alleged that in 2002, he grabbed her by the wrist, pulled her onto the couch, pulled down her pants, and had sex with her, even though she had asked him 3 times to stop. The judge said she was a credible witness who gave straightforward answers. Court heard that at the time, in 2002, the husband had undergone a hair transplant. His doctor, he testified, had told him to abstain from sex for 2 weeks after his surgical procedure. He told the court the alleged incident could not have happened because he had followed that advice. Quote, the accused did not call any medical evidence to show that it was a standard medical practice, the judge said. And I find it that his evidence in his regard does not accord with the common sense to a reasonably informed person. Smith said that the man was argumentative and evasive as a witness, and he rejected his account as not believable. Nevertheless, the judge said he could not find him guilty of a crime. So on one side, we have a woman who didn't know that she was allowed to refuse sex to her husband, and when she does, she files a crime. And she's also a reliable witness who seems to answer the questions pretty well. On the other side, we have the husband, whose defense is that he followed his doctor's medical advice not to have sex for 2 weeks, and he was argumentative and evasive as a witness, and yet they ruled against the woman. Now, clearly this judge is not convinced because he believes that the man believes that he did not break a crime. And that's why he's saying that the prosecution hasn't delivered a good enough argument. I think this is horseshit because there's almost no denying that there was a sexual assault that took place. From the evidence that's been presented on both sides, he hasn't been very credible. All he says is that I've never done that and I follow my doctor's advice. And she says, yeah, well, I can give you specifics. It happened this time. Even the judge was starting to say that he's not a very good witness. But because of his cultural difference, I mean, they got married in Gaza, so clearly there's something there. In his decision, the judge ended up saying that, quote, marriage is not a shield for sexual assault. However, the issue is, in his decision, the judge ended up stating, quote, the marriage is not a shield for sexual assault. However, the issue in this trial is whether, considering the whole of the evidence, the Crown has proven that the allegation beyond a reasonable doubt. Any sexual contact without explicit and ongoing consent is sexual assault, regardless of the relationship. He may have believed that he had the right to have sex with her as her husband, but Canadian sexual assault law is clear and was amended to include sexual assault against a spouse in 1983. So he's even stated that there was a break in the law that took place. That this was sexual assault. That he forced himself on his wife, yet he's still not ruling in favor. We have numerous examples outside of the West of women who have been taught that their husbands cannot rape them because they're married and that their husbands have full right and full control in the marriage. These usually tend to come out of Islamic countries, mostly, but not specifically. The article did not actually specify the religion of the accused, but going off a few things that was stated inside the article, it's pretty obvious that this was a Muslim couple. First is the location where they got married, Gaza. They're Palestinians, so Palestine is a super Islamic religious country, so it's very likely that these two were Islamic. Number two is the fact that it was an arranged marriage. Arranged marriages have historically been a religious thing to do, and I would say probably the two biggest religions these days that do still peddle in arranged marriages would be Islam and Hinduism. That being said, there's still a lot of religious faiths that still peddle in arranged marriages, and that still does include in the Christian faith. Third is that she didn't know that she was allowed to refuse sex with her husband, and that for him to force himself on her was illegal. This is another thing that seems to me to typically come under the Islamic faith, that their women seem to see themselves as properties of their husband and as their property, therefore they cannot be raped. Also because the husband is head of the household, so this is another reason that they would feel that when the husband wants sex, that they get sex. So the judge says that there is not enough evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this man is guilty. Well, you can't really provide forensic evidence some 15 years after the fact. I mean, you can't really get a sample of his semen at the crime scene or anything like that, or there's some other tests, I'm not sure exactly what they do, but I think they check for bruising in the vaginal walls, I think, but there are other tests they can do to see if sex was consensual or not. They can't really do those tests some 15 years later to find evidence if she was raped. But also, she didn't bring this up until she was aware that he couldn't do this, and clearly it was something that she was not okay with, that she had problems with. I mean, I don't think any woman likes being raped. So when she found out this was a crime, she reported it. Could she be faking for leverage over her husband during this child access? Maybe, but the reason I'm not really inclined to believe that is because I feel like she would have tried to slander her husband in some other way before finding out about this and charging him with this crime. I feel she would have said something that would have made him look bad and given her more leverage in the child access hearings. But she didn't, so I'm a little more inclined to believe that when she realized that it was a crime and that she had been raped, that she reported it. And then we really got to think about this on the other side too. The judge says, well, this guy doesn't believe that what he did was a crime, and the prosecution wasn't able to prove that what he did had intent to commit this crime, essentially. Then you're dealing with a man who doesn't see rape as a problem. Now, I'm sure he wouldn't go out and just rape any woman. This would be specifically his wife. But clearly there's some sort of sadistic, criminal other side to this. And that needs to be dealt with. Even if he didn't know that and he thought it was his right, maybe this would be a guy worth making an example out of, to let other people know that you don't have that right when you come to our country. That you can't just come here and rape your wife or beat your wife, because we don't allow that. Just because somebody comes from another culture, doesn't mean we have to accept every single thing from that culture. We accept the good and leave out the bad. Raping women and beating women are bad. Let's leave those out. Food? Good. Bring in the food. Covering women? Bad. Shawarma king? Good. Soccer players? Good. Maybe then we can compete on the fucking global stage at soccer instead of just hockey. Finally, do something. I don't know. I don't pay attention to soccer, but I just don't think that Canada can be any good at soccer. That being said, I pay absolutely no attention to soccer whatsoever. You can get me about hockey, and I might sound weird, but professional paintballing. Those are the two that I pay attention to. So, moving on from this story. Before I do move on, actually, the reason I said that this is a politically correct story is because clearly This guy got charged not because he committed a crime, but is because he came from a different culture. It's a very politically correct move to say that somebody should not be guilty of a crime because they thought that it was okay under their culture, or they came from a place where it wasn't a crime. Well, no, because if that's true, then why can't a Western woman walk into Saudi Arabia and say, sorry, where I come from, it's not a crime to cover my head? But that doesn't happen. In fact, there's terrible stories whenever women want to do things like that. I don't know if this is a real story. I haven't actually looked it up. I only heard it from a coworker a few months back, but he said apparently there was one woman who was broadcasting on Twitter or Facebook or something that she was going to go to Saudi Arabia and not cover her head and walk around in public. And apparently, according to the story, she got gang raped in the streets and then went to the police to report it, and then she got arrested for having sex outside of marriage and in public. So whether that's real or not, I'm not sure, but it's not far off from the truth. What I'm really just trying to say is other countries, other cultures don't accommodate our laws and our cultures the way we do. And just because we accommodate other cultures doesn't mean we have to accommodate their laws. In fact, they should be following our laws if we're accommodating their culture inside our society. This right here is a good example of moral relativism at work, in that this guy didn't know any better, so therefore he did nothing wrong. That's more or less what moral relativism talks about. It says that you can't judge people based on your own standards. You have to accommodate to their own. It's all relative. Everybody's morals are different other places. While I think this is very true, there is a moral relativity in the world just in general. I think every single country, continent, and side of the world has their own version of moral relativity, in that none of the morals are the same. You need to look on your morals with an objective point of view, and you need to solidify them, because otherwise you have stuff like moral relativity, which tells you that certain things are okay if certain people were taught this way or raised this way, but now they're here, so you need to accommodate. But it shouldn't work that way. We shouldn't accept somebody coming here and raping his wife because that's the way he's been taught. All right, we're going to move on to another story. Let me ask you guys something. Have you ever known a pregnant woman? Well, let me tell you something. If you ever have, you better stop saying pregnant women right now. That's right. According to the British Medical Association, it is now offensive to call pregnant women expecting mothers. This was in A Guide to Effective Communication, Inclusive Language in the Workplace, that was released for the British Medical Association, and this was actually only released for its staff. But anyway, it was released to its staff in just how to conduct themselves with other people and when they're doing research. But how ridiculous is this? You cannot call a pregnant woman an expected mother. And the reason for this is because the BMA feels that saying expectant mothers is offensive to other transgender people. Yeah. And I don't believe they wrote this because they got some pressure by the LGBT community to do something about this, about how it's offensive to them. I'm pretty sure the BMA just decided one day that they could see it as offensive, and then we cannot call pregnant women expectant mothers. And probably pregnant women in and of its own very soon is going to be seen as, oh no, that's too far. Oh, you can't say pregnant women. Pregnant women is a cisgendered, privileged way to look at the world. Goddamn fucking bigot, transphobic motherfucker. So the new term they want everybody to use now is, are you ready for this? Pregnant people. Pregnant people is what they want to classify pregnant women as. It's exactly how I feel. Along in this pamphlet, they also listed a number of other terms that are considered taboo these days. Well, at least according to the BMA. So along with things that are different now is the elderly are now to be called older people. How does this even make a fucking difference, elderly to older people? Does it really make them feel that much younger? The disability lifts are now accessibility lifts. Biological male and female are now assigned male or female. Take it away, George.
I don't like words that hide the truth. I don't like words that conceal reality. I don't like euphemisms or euphemistic language. And American English is loaded with euphemisms because Americans have a lot of trouble dealing with reality. Americans have trouble facing the truth. So they invent a kind of a soft language to protect themselves from it. And it gets worse with every generation. For some reason, it just keeps getting worse.
So those are the ones that were absolutely taboo that we needed to change. But along with this, they ended up posting a bunch of terms that should be just avoided altogether, that you should not use. These include born man or born woman in relation to trans people, as these phrases are reductive and oversimplifying a complex subject. While it is a complicated subject, we can break it down to very simple terms. If you have 2 X chromosomes, you're a woman. If you have an X and a Y chromosome, you're a guy. That's the way it works. So it's actually not a complex subject. You have men, you have women, and I will even say there is a spectrum to men and women, as in that some men have more feminine qualities than masculine qualities. So sure, there's a spectrum, but you're still born to a specific sex. You're either male or you're female. But when you start wanting to go off the spectrum and you want 70, 80, 90, 100 different genders, over 9,000 genders, then we have a problem because the science doesn't back that up. The science says that there are 2 genders. Now, in terms of somebody just transitioning male to female or female to male, I think that still people are born in their own bodies, but I can at least understand more of a transition from one to the other for some people. Some people it seems kind of obvious to me. It's just people that you've known your entire life. It's like that a lot with gay people. There was one guy like that in my school. Everybody, he came from Christian parents. Everybody in the school for years waited for him to come out. When we all got out of high school, within a year or 2, he finally came out of the closet, and he tells everyone, he's like, hey guys, I'm gay. And everybody says, yeah, we know. We've known for years. We've been waiting for you to catch up. And this is the same thing I find. There's just some guys that I've known that if I found out that they were more female at heart, I could actually believe it. But that doesn't mean that they're not suffering from some sort of mental disorder. It's just nobody wants to say that. They wanted to see it as it's just a natural part of the world. It's not a natural part of the world. People are being born in your own sex is the natural part. Oh boy, I wonder how much hate people are going to send me for this. Elsewhere, staff are told to substitute the word surname or last name instead of using family name. Why? Because we're going to offend some people now that haven't really had much of a good family experience? Is that why? That's still their fucking family name. Mankind and manpower should be avoided because it's not good practice to use a masculine noun instead of swapped for humanity. And personnel. Yeah. Personnel power or personnel kind. And listing prefixes for names such as Prof, Dr, Mr, Mrs, or Miss should be put in a particular order on forms that avoid a perceived hierarchy. So that way it's not Mr. first and Mrs. next, but that way there's no possible way that people could see it that way.
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
This is just getting ridiculous these days. If we can't even put down Mr. or Mrs. in particular order anymore, how the fuck are we ever going to progress in life? I'm serious. We have a real problem. How the hell are we supposed to overcome it if we're worried about a perceived hierarchy on a goddamn form that says Professor, Doctor, Mr., Mrs., Miss? We're screwed. I mean, these social justice warriors have just put their roots into absolutely everything. Is there anything left that remains untouched? They've gotten themselves into sports, especially recently. They've gotten themselves into the humanities, and now they're seeping themselves into the hard science. Now, the British Medical Institute is adhering to this politically correct terminology and these SJWs ideology. What sort of destructive path is this going to take us down? Because this postmodern doctrine that keeps getting pushed, if we can't even talk about real facts anymore in places where it is necessary, such as the medical field or chemistry, how long until physics gets touched and suddenly something in physics is sexist? I'm really waiting for somebody to say that in math, when you're using the Cartesian plane, the graph, we have the vertical line, which is the y, and then we also have the horizontal line, which is the x. I'm waiting for somebody to say that because they use x and y, which would, if we're taking those in terms of chromosomes, would mean a man. I'm waiting them for say that using the Cartesian plane as it is, using the x and the y, is sexist because it's promoting male dominance or something like that. You wait. Next few years, I'm guaranteeing you something like that is going to come out. But moving on this article, a representative from the BMA ended up saying, quote, "Gender inequality is reflected in traditional ideas about the roles of women and men. Though they have shifted over time, the assumptions and stereotypes that underpin those ideas are often deeply rooted. A large majority of people that have been pregnant or have given birth identify as women. That's because women give birth. We can include intersex men and trans men who may get pregnant by saying pregnant people instead of expectant mothers. Intersex men and trans men. Those are women who transition to men. They are not men giving birth. This is completely stupid because they're acting like it's actually people who were born with a dick that somehow have gotten pregnant. No, they were born as a woman with all the factors that allow them to get pregnant, and then they transition to a guy. So no, trans men and intersex men cannot have babies. Women can have babies. If intersex men and trans men are pregnant, that means they are biologically women who have transitioned to men. It recently emerged that a Briton who was born a girl but wants to become a man has put surgery on hold in order to have a baby. Hayden Cross, 20, is legally male and had hormone treatments but not yet had sex change surgery. There are no other known cases of a transitioning person becoming pregnant in the UK. So they're doing this because one person who is transitioning to men put themselves on hold, gave birth, and then is going to continue transitioning to a man. This is stupid. Fucking stupid. However, Heather Ashton from the transgender support group TG Pals said, Quote, "We know that the biological females are the pregnant ones, but trans people are parents too, and this is a massive step forward to prevent discrimination against them. The fact that the terminology is changing can only be a positive thing for everyone who wants to be a parent and has the right to be a parent." Nobody said they can't be parents. What we said is they can't give birth. That is a scientific fact. So there's no reason to change this terminology around of pregnant women. And if one of these intersex men or trans men do get pregnant, then they're going to be parents anyway. There's nothing stopping them from being parents because they're going to give birth to a child. So doing this was irrelevant. What this person, Heather Ashton, said was fucking stupid. She's an idiot. The people at the British Medical Association are fucking dumb and they're goddamn PhD scientists. That is why we are all... The next story was pointed out actually by someone on Twitter, and you can see the tweet right there. And it was about 2 articles that came out of the Daily Mail involving how fucking ridiculous the British cops have become. The first one involves how underfunded they are, and the second one also involves how underfunded they are, but that one mostly has to do with their PC bullshit. So the first one is called "Poppy Day is Cancelled by the Police. Outrage as forces insist they cannot afford to man remembrance parades amid budget cuts." Poppy Day parades to honor Britain's war dead are facing the axe because police chiefs across the country are refusing to send officers to block off roads. Campaigners have blasted forces for breaking the decades-old tradition, but senior officers say they have no choice because the government budget cuts. Instead, volunteers are battling to raise hundreds of pounds to hire professional traffic management firms to meet strict health and safety standards. Organizers of the annual parade in Melton Mowbray, Leicestershire, which attracts about 10,000 people, say they need about £800 to save the event. West Midlands police have also withdrawn its support for dozens of Remembrance Day parades. Organizers of a parade in Mapperley, Nottinghamshire, said they were gobsmacked when police said that they will not marshal traffic there this year. Frank Mullen, 80, who served in the Royal Signals, said, quote, "It is ridiculous. It is going to be cancelled because the police can't be there, and we can't by law stop traffic. We are one of the richest countries, and they can't even afford 3 or 4 police officers for an hour's work," end quote. They don't seem to understand the implications of doing this. People take November 11th ceremonies very seriously. Soldiers, military personnel, veterans, and people like me who understand the great sacrifices they make take this very seriously. We understand how great of a sacrifice these people are making, and we also understand how important that sacrifice truly is. We view Remembrance Day as one of the only days, if not the only day, that we can actually, honor the dead, the people who have fought for us. These aren't just, the soldier who died in the Afghan war, let's say. These are also the soldiers that fought and died in every war for us. World War I, World War II, every single one in between. It's universal across the world, yet it's unique for every single country. Because we all share the same history of warfare, and some of that warfare is joint, such as World War I, World War II. But then we also have our own individual wars, and the people lost during those wars that we honor. For example, America's Remembrance Day, as much as it is the same as a Canadian Remembrance Day, it is slightly different, because they're going to be honoring those dead in a war that we didn't participate in, such as Vietnam. So to every single person in the world who celebrates Remembrance Day, and every single patriot for their country on this planet, they understand how important that is. And you don't have to be a hardcore patriot of your country. See, I'm a patriot of Canada. I love my country. I'll also criticize my country when it's wrong. You don't have to be a hardcore patriot in order to understand how important of a day this is. Even if the police can't show up due to budget cuts, which really does seem to be the truth, it's just they can't afford to make it out there, people are going to see this as a huge sign of disrespect by the police force. I honestly think one of the best things the police could do on that day is work something out to maybe have officers volunteer to do that, because that would actually show a lot of respect. It's like, well, if we're not going to get the money anyway, we're going to volunteer our time to show our support for all the people that died. That's really, I think, the way they should go about this. But it is unfortunate that the police forces are going to bear the brunt of the criticism, when really the problem is that the government has not given them the funds that is required in order to be able to do this. I think cutting down on your police force is a terrible idea, unless it's like, if you don't have the crime to match for a large police force, okay. But we're seeing budget cuts for police when in areas where they actually need to keep their funds, if not increase their funds. But for some reason, they end up getting their budget cut. And this is one of the worst things you can do. If there's no cops around, then we're really living in an anarchic society. Because as much as the police can be our enemy as in repressing us, they can also be our friend as in keeping us safe. Because even if day to day we're not dealing with an actual threat, the police being around do keep a lot of people in line. Otherwise, people would be doing all sorts of bad shit because there would be nobody there to stop them. The responsibility would be on the individual. And there's many individuals out there. As much as they say that, good will triumph evil, the problem is a lot of people on the good side tend to be a lot more passive. So there's a lot of people that won't take the action necessary that is required to keep themselves and perhaps their family safe. For these people, the cops keep them safe every day because they wouldn't last long in an anarchic world. Granted, those sort of people very few of them would exist in an anarchic world, or they would all be killed off in an anarchic world. And for that reason, cutting down on your police force is a terrible idea, especially when you need it. Part of the reason I bring this up is due to the second article that was in that tweet, and it's that officers parade around in bear costumes, paint their nails to fight slavery, and wear high heels to highlight domestic violence, while crime statistics soar. So a bunch of cops who are really trying to do nothing more than virtue signal how great of a job they're doing, in the end, are doing so terribly at their job that the real crime is not getting investigated. And this is the problem with things like political correctness and social justice, is a lot of it is just virtue signaling, make yourselves look good. Now we have a bunch of cops that are doing a bunch of virtue signaling to try and connect with the community, but they're not doing their actual fucking jobs of stopping crimes. So, this article goes on to say that police told increasingly bizarre gimmicks are undermining jobs of tackling crime. Officers criticized for garishly painting their nails and posing in bumper cars. Other police forces pose in bear masks and stroke puppies for stress release. So essentially, people are so pissed off that the police haven't been doing their job and doing stupid gimmicks like this that the police chiefs all across the different forces are being urged to get their damn officers back on track to solving some fucking crimes. As we can see, they were told their increasingly bizarre gimmicks are undermining the job of tackling crime. Officers were criticized for garishly painting their nails, posing for photos in bumper cars, and stroking puppies for stress relief. So as we can see in this first side, we have police officer posed in bear masks, and in one force, drug squads insisted on asking cannabis growers if they were victims of slavery. This is a new practice that apparently British cops have been doing, and it's that the suspected cannabis farmers have been given a get-out-of-jail-free card when police ask them if they are slaves. Figures show that there have been a huge surge of suspected forced laborers to feed the nation's £1 billion cannabis habit, but anti-drug campaigners are concerned crime lords could deliberately mislead well-meaning police to get off the hook. One said that asking anyone here a slave was an open invitation for criminals looking for lenient treatment. Absolutely. Because when you make that call, you immediately are alerting everybody that you don't know who's a slave and who's not a slave. So anybody who's actually a part of the organization, maybe a high part of the organization, can play it off as they're a slave. It's much better tactic to do what cops have traditionally done, which is arrest everybody on the scene, sort it out later. Because not only do you get everybody at once and you can take them back and figure out who's good, who's bad, you also have the time to search whatever area you're in for the evidence. But this is just stupid to immediately, to the bad guys, put out, hey, anybody here a slave? You know? You're obviously going to get more lenient treatment if it's like, oh yeah, I'm here against my will. This is just a bad all-around idea. The article goes on to say, in Avon and Somerset, police went out on patrol wearing neon nail varnish to raise awareness of modern-day slavery. And as we can see here in this slide, we have a police officer who's very proud to show off his freshly painted nails. Oh yeah, I bet he's doing a great job to fight slavery right now. The force posted images of officers pampering themselves with the catchline, "Let's nail it!" Male and female staff are encouraged to wear garish neon nail varnish while on patrol to raise awareness for people trafficking in nail bars. Officers excitedly tweeted about pampering themselves before their shifts and posted photos of their lurid nails while they were on patrol. How are you supposed to be taken seriously as a cop if you're going around painting your nails? Oh my god, y'all. You don't want all nice, sympathetic cops. As much as we all think when we deal with a hard-ass cop, you're like, why can't they just be nice? I gotta be honest, I'd rather have some more hard-ass cops going around than a lot of really nice, sweet cops, because chances are those hard-ass cops can take on the enemy a lot better than those sweet-ass cops can. I mean, if you put some... Let's just say, for instance, we have 2 5-year veteran cops. One is kind of a hard-ass, and then we got Mr. up here painting his nails and looking out, oh, look at me. Who do you really want protecting you if they're the only line of defense between you and the bad guy, between you and the criminal? Do you want that hard-ass cop, or do you want that cop that, as you notice that his hand's going for his gun, he's wearing neon green or neon blue nail varnish? I bet you all can guess which one I would choose. But the Avon and Somerset police campaign was roundly criticized by charity bosses, politicians, and members of the public via social media as a spectacular waste of time. The force said it was disappointed about the criticism and urged anyone who felt victimized by such comments to report them as hate crimes. What? So if any officer or somebody member of the police force feels victimized by some comments, they can report it as a hate crime over nail varnish? Where's the gun? I can't do this anymore. I'm going to shoot myself in the head. I'm going to shoot myself in the head. How weak are your police officers that they cannot take some criticism about a stupid campaign that is being run without having to report it as hate crimes? I mean, is this a police force? Or is this some sort of fucking Yale University campus? Male officers from South Wales Police, as well as the force's police and crime commissioner, posed in women's shoes yesterday to highlight the issue of domestic violence. When chasing a crook, they would not be much use. But policemen pulled on the high heels yesterday to highlight the issue of domestic violence. Dozens of officers strutted their stuff across Cardiff city centre with the traditional uniform rounded off with colourful footwear. I'll be honest right now, I do not want to see a collection of guys wearing high heels. Unless it's these guys. If anybody has not seen Kids in the Hall, you leave my channel right now. Actually, don't, because that would probably be just about everybody, so please don't. Anyway, going back to the article, it says, even the police and crime commissioner of South Wales Police donned a pair of pink stilettos. Alan Michaels' walk was slightly unsteady as he posed for a short video which was posted to his official Twitter account. Our precarious style of heel certainly turned heads as we walked through the busy street, and lots of people took photographs along the way. Yes, they were probably either putting them up online or texting them to their friends saying, "Can you believe this shit?" And that's what it's all about, really. Unfortunately, as police officers, we see firsthand the impact of violence against women, and that it's a way for us to encourage others to make a stand against that. How about instead you go stop domestic violent crimes? Just thought. It was also revealed this week that the stressed out officers are recovering from tragedies by cuddling puppies. It really is starting to sound like they're just giving safe spaces to their cops, which I know cops have stressful jobs, but I gotta say, I'm really worried if my police force starts saying that they need a safe space. The cops may need a safe space. The criminals don't, so, which one's going to win in the end? On Monday, the Metropolitan Police Service admitted that tens of thousands of crimes would no longer be investigated. The force said cases worth less than £50 or where there is no CCTV would not be probed unless a suspect is identified. Earlier this week, chief officers met in London to discuss the disturbing increase in crime and the toll it was taking on their staff. They are desperate to persuade the government to pump more cash into the front line to tackle violence, complex offenses, and new threats. One chief officer said, "Many police officers feel trapped in a corner. They have no money and a lot to tackle on their patches." In many cases, these gimmicky events don't cost much and are an easy way of showing something is being done. I would like to just change that a little bit, update that a little bit, and say that it's an easy way of showing that you're doing nothing. Yet shocking figures out this week show that almost every type of crime is up, with knife offenses alone rising by a quarter. 9 out of 10 home burglaries are unsolved. They have forgotten what their purpose is, said Mike Neville, a retired senior Scotland Yard detective. Too many modern chief constables have got more degrees under their belts than arrests. The people in charge have simply not done their job. The reason they do not investigate crime is they have never done it themselves. They are looking for cheap wins. Defending the initiative, Chief Inspector Mark Eddington said, quote, "Some people will disagree with the campaign, which is their prerogative, but the campaign has worked as it's got people talking," end quote. The cash-strapped force has recently shut its burglary unit, which solved only 7,623 of 70,522 break-ins between 2011 and 2016. Chief Constable Andy Marsh last month admitted the force was at a tipping point. It has had to make £65 million of cuts since 2010 and is dealing with large numbers of officers off sick. I can tell you one thing. I have never been more happy than now to not live in England. See, it's not that I'm against living in England, but if this is my police force, I would not feel confident with them around. They don't seem to get anything done, and as that one retired Scotland Yard detective said, they're looking for cheap wins, and that's all they're doing. They're going around and making public appearances, making it seem like they're doing something. But while they're doing that, the criminals are laughing because they're pulling off major crimes and getting away with it because there's not a cop in sight. So maybe these British police chiefs should get their shit together, or they should be fired and the police force should be essentially remade. So we move on to our next article. Up here in Canada, there's been a huge shit show over in Quebec about this Bill 68, which is banning the Niqab and Burqa while receiving public services. So what this is saying is that this new bill that will be put in place will essentially ban these face coverings, and it's not just related to the Niqab and the Burqa, but it also says that balaclavas, ski masks, scarves covering part of your face, even sunglasses would get affected, and you can't wear these in these areas. This would include things like parks, using the bus, as well as just getting government services, such as going to, get your license or something like that. So for a long time now, there's been debate going on in Quebec about religious material in public. There was one that went down, I think it was in 2015 during the provincial elections, is that the Parti Québécois, or at least their provincial affiliate, they ended up trying to push this along with another referendum, and pretty much lost everything because of it. It was really funny to see. But now we have the Quebec Liberal Party, which has pushed this bill through. The bill was passed despite opposition from the Parti Québécois and the Coalition Avenir Québec, which argued the legislation does not go far enough to restrict the wearing of conspicuous religious symbols. Justice Minister Stéphanie Vallée has maintained that the bill's requirement that government services be provided and received with the face uncovered is not aimed at any religious groups. Really? It's not aimed at any religious groups? Are you telling me in the middle of winter when someone comes in with, say, a balaclava on or a giant scarf that's wrapped up around their head, that you give them service without taking it off? Is that what you're telling me? Come on. Don't bullshit me and my watchers and listeners. They're a lot smarter than that. It's very clear this is targeted towards a religious group. Although we're talking about getting a government services and stuff that requires ID, then yeah, absolutely you should take it off, because if we can't see your face, if all we can see is, especially concerning the niqab, which, all you can see is the eyes, then you can't really get a facial recognition because of that. The only thing you could tell is what their skin color is. But anyway, this justice minister ends up saying, having your face uncovered is a legitimate question of communication, identification, and security. She said this on the eve of the bill's adoption, but the title of the law, an act to foster adherence to state religious neutrality, leaves little doubt to the true motivation. You're trying to argue that it's not religiously motivated when the bill is literally saying you're trying to uphold state neutrality in religion. I guess in Quebec, they really think the people over there are stupid and that they can't at least read the main part of a bill and the fucking headline. Initially aimed only at provincial services, the Liberals widened the law's scope in August to embody municipal services, including public transit and subsidized housing offices. Nicole Fillon, coordinator of the Ligue des Droits et Libertés, a human rights defense group, warned that the law will have a discriminatory effect on religious groups who are targeted, in particular women. And for anybody who doesn't speak French, they are the coordinator of the League of Rights and Liberties. But let's say that quote again. This time we'll say it with a French accent. They say the law will have a discriminatory effect on religious groups who are targeted, in particular women. It's okay, I can say that. My father was born in Quebec. Yves Torres, Quebec representative of the National Council of Canadian Muslims, said the law infringes on religious freedom and will almost certainly be challenged in court, without a doubt. I can already start hearing the Quebec courts blowing up as hundreds, if not thousands, of Canadian Muslims start filing their application to sue the goddamn government. Quebec has wrestled with the issue of religious accommodation since it became a central issue in the 2007 provincial election, leading to a public commission. In 2013, the Parti Québécois government introduced a charter of values that would have prohibited public sector workers from wearing any conspicuous religious symbols. The PQ was defeated before the charter was adopted. Holy shit, that was in 2013, not 2015? I'm getting old. Quebec is the first jurisdiction in North America with a law prohibiting women who wear the Niqab or Burqa from receiving public services. France outlawed the face-covering garment in all public places in 2011, and Belgium and Austria have followed suit. In the Netherlands, women cannot wear the full veil in schools, hospitals, or on public transportation. Fillon fears Quebec is headed in the same direction as France. We are moving gradually towards banning it in public space. When we are controlling what people wear in public transit, we are pretty far along. I have to find that I agree with them on that one. I don't ever like the idea of a government telling people what to do or what to wear. Only the Liberals voted in favor of the bill, but they were able to carry the vote 66 to 51. This eventually went to the federal level. And, we're looking for all of the major party leaders to comment on and see what they have to say. And they all had different reactions to it. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh attacked Quebec's religious neutrality bill Wednesday. That was just past Wednesday. Positioning the New Democrats more strongly against the bill than any other major federal party. He said, quote, "I think that this is a law that violates human rights. I'm completely opposed to the bill, but I'm completely confident in the existing protections that are in place in Quebec that will protect human rights." Singh has had a stronger stance against the law than the Liberal government, which has so far been reluctant to condemn it outright. In the House of Commons on Wednesday, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom applied to all Canadians. He ended up saying, quote, "I will continue to work to ensure that all Canadians are protected by the Charter, while respecting the choices of different governments at different levels. Here at the federal level, we defend the rights of all Canadians." How was my Trudeau impression? Let me know in the comments below. Was it good? Was it shitty? I've honestly never tried it before, but that's more or less the way he talks. The office of the Heritage Minister Mélanie Joly has issued a statement to the National Post. As the Prime Minister has said on numerous occasions, we do not believe that the government should be telling people what they can and cannot wear, the statement reads. With regard to the legislation in question, it is a matter for the Quebec National Assembly where it has been debated at length and it will not interfere. I think fundamentally we can't have the state tell people what to wear, what not to wear. That to me reflects a law that is discriminatory and that breaks the fundamental principles of human rights. For the Conservative Party, Jake Entright, director of communications for the Conservative leader Andrew Scheer, ended up making a statement saying, "Ultimately, it's up to the Quebecers to pass judgment on this legislation. The Conservative Party believes every Canadian has the right to expose themselves and practice their religion, not just in private, but also in public office too." Okay, so for anybody out there that's not Canadian watching, most likely Americans, one thing, I don't know if you have this much going on, maybe you have as much of a state battle as we're having right now with our province battle. One thing that makes our battle with Quebec a little bit different is the history of Canada. France colonized Quebec and Britain colonized the rest of Canada and, America and all that shit. Anyway, when after our war with France over here in Canada, we ended up coming to essentially an agreement with them. We give them Quebec, and they're recognized as they're essentially a nation within a nation. So that way Quebec actually has more say in what they can do with their province than any other province in Canada. And that's because they're trying to hold on to their French heritage. So that's why so many of these leaders, you probably may have noticed, have been so resistant to actually make a full-on statement on this and say what should be done. But all these are saying it needs to revert back to the Quebec through the Quebec provincial level in order for a decision to be made. This is because if they were to actually put forward what they're like full out and say how they felt and how it should proceed, then it looks like they're infringing on Quebec's right to uphold their own culture and their own heritage. And this has been a very common defense by Quebec in order to get the good federal government off their back. Sometimes it is a relevant defense for them. It is actually times they are defending their culture and their heritage. Many times it's just a leveraging tool they use to their advantage to get the way they want. So for anybody who's aware of that or living outside of the United States, that's really the main important part about this. What I find a little bit interesting, though, has been our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's reaction to all this. He's pretty much been hands off the whole situation and said, it's up to them to make their own decision, not our job to tell them what to do. That, of course, for the reason I just stated. But what's really interesting about it is that he really took a back seat on this in comparison to what he usually would do in a situation like this. See, back in this one for sure was back in 2015, a little bit before our election went down and Justin Trudeau was voted into office. Stephen Harper was trying to push a bill that would ban the niqab and other face coverings from Muslim women when they came to the country. And when they took a citizenship oath, they had to unveil for the citizenship oath. And this caused a lot of controversy at the time. NDP leader Tom Mulcair was completely against it, and even Trudeau put up a real shit about this. And he was completely against the Prime Minister at the time, Stephen Harper's bill. And I don't know if he actually said the terms racist, but he was definitely implying it in those terms, that it is a racist bill. What ended up happening to this bill is it got challenged by a Muslim woman in court. Eventually it got struck down as unconstitutional. So the ban on this wasn't able to be put in place. At the time, Prime Minister Harper was asked by why the government should be able to tell people like this woman Ishak, who was the one who challenged it and in the end won out and was allowed to wear her covering during the citizenship ceremony. When asked why the government should be able to tell people like Ishak how to dress and how to live, he said that the government is trying to promote the broad view that Canada is an open and equal society and that there are times when people must reveal their identity. Following their victories over the Tories in October 2015, the Trudeau Liberals made a great show of dropping Harper's Supreme Court appeal to uphold the niqab ban. Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould personally called Zunera Ishak to inform her that the Liberals were ending the Ottawa's legal action. The problem is that this new bill by Quebec is a much more controversial bill in that it's much more widespread. Harper's, you just had to take the citizenship unveiled. This one would be on transit, essentially everywhere, getting your service, and just almost in public anywhere. But on this one, he was pretty much was refusing to make a peep. He even refused to say whether he believed that the law violated the Charter of Rights, saying instead that there will be a lot of reflections on the law's constitutionality. He promised only to look at how this will unfold with full respect for the National Assembly that has the right to pass its own laws. Some of the other problems with this that's going to come are a little unforeseen now, but it will affect us in the future. According to Statistics Canada, the Muslim population is going to double in 20 years and it's going to make up 7.2% of the nation. That's going to be about 2.5 million people who are from Muslim descent, and this is a bill that seems to target them. One report that was released in April 2016 by the Environics Institute, it was a comprehensive report on Muslims, said, quote, Muslims are one of the most religiously observant groups in Canada, and their religious identity and practice appear to be strengthening rather than weakening as their lives evolve in Canada. At the moment, when they were conducting their survey, Environics tallied female Muslims and found a mere 3% wear the niqab, but a decade earlier the number showed only 1% wore it. It could very well continue to double. I think that's almost inevitable unless something changes in Islam itself and the women themselves stop wearing the niqab, the hijab, the burqa. But if they don't, then yeah, absolutely, we're just going to see that continue on, and there will be more women walking around with a niqab. Likewise, for head coverings in general, 42% of Muslim women wore them in 2006, but now that's pushed into majority territory, with 53% donning either hijab, chador, or niqab. Niqabs or burqa should have no place in civilized society. Quebec professor Boxana Nazin, a Muslim woman born in Bangladesh, told Tariq Fatah in his latest Sun column. It is neither religious nor cultural. It is an anti-West political statement introduced by radical Islamists all over the globe. End quote. So these have been the concerns. However, just tonight, which is October 24th, at about 8 o'clock, 8:30, there was an article that got put out by CTV News, and it was an update on this. And what they said is that that in fact Quebecers can browse a library, ride a bus, and sit in a hospital waiting room with their faces covered, according to the clarification of Bill 62 offered by the province. But the rules still make it clear that in-person interactions with public employees must be conducted on a literal face-to-face basis. In a quote made, the government ended up saying, nobody will refuse to use a public transit, nobody will be refused emergency health care, nobody will be chased out of a public library in Quebec. Quebec Justice Minister Stéphanie Vallée apologized repeatedly for what she called a widespread misunderstanding of the law while speaking at a press conference. Last week, she said a person with any type of face coverings would have to remove it for the entire duration of a bus ride or interaction with a public servant. Now, she explains, only those using a photo ID card would have to expose their faces, and only long enough to be identified. Montreal Mayor Dennis Coderre said that he expects that to see legal challenge against the bill. I don't think that it's valid, he said. At the end of the day, there is no sanction. McGill Faculty of Law professor Daniel Weinstock agrees. I think that if it doesn't stand a chance before the equality provision of both the Quebec and the Canadian Charter, let alone the freedom of religion provision, he said. I think it's almost unavoidable that the Muslim community will see this as an attack on them personally. I mean, it obviously is. This is going to affect very few people, but the religion is a big part to Muslim people. So if they're not able to cover their faces in the name of their religion, they're going to see this as a big insult and a big bullseye on their backs. I'm kind of split on this one. Now, I guess it kind of changes with seeing this update as to what things are. Because before, if it was just talking in all public places, that does change things a little bit, where I could support the bill in that I think that people dealing with government, services, and where they need to identify themselves should have to unveil. But if we're talking about a park or a bus, then we're getting into the territory of the individual making their own choices. I think it's fair when accessing government aid that you do have to unveil to be identified, or anything else you have to be identified with. These are perfectly fair laws to put in place because, well, here in the West, we don't cover our faces typically. So if somebody from another culture that do want to come over and live here, then they've got to respect the laws we put in place, and covering up your face here is not the norm. And personally, I don't like the niqab, the burqa, the hijab, any of that. I just see it as a symbol of oppression. I know there's probably plenty of Muslim women that would tell me otherwise, but I still don't agree with them. But I don't like these coverings, and it worries me whenever I'm walking down the street and I'm starting to see more and more women that are covered up, especially the younger they are. I sometimes have seen some girls that are 6 years old that are wearing hijab, and I just think it's awful that at that age, that's the sort of message they're being sent. So I do agree with the bill in this regard, and I guess it kind of changes my initial opinion of this next part, but what I was essentially going to say is that on the flip side, I am against government telling you how to dress, how to act, and that. I've already stated that before, And also, I'm against a government that installs religious laws, actually. It might sound a little weird as an atheist saying I don't like religious laws, but I've said before that essentially being an atheist and able to express your views falls under the same rights and freedoms as religious people do to express their own. I mean, if that provision is not in place and we got a Muslim government or a Christian government or something of the sort, then if we don't have that provision in place, then there's nothing stopping them from squashing atheistic voices or secular voices. So that's one reason I'm against it. The other reason is this is getting too involved in people's lives, telling them how to wear and making rules against their religion. It has not ended well historically, and I could not see it ending well now. It hasn't ended well when it's been whether it's a religious country installing their own laws, or whether it's been more of a secular atheist country that are trying to repress religion, such as, say, the USSR, the old Soviet Union. So we can look to the Middle East to see the problems of installing religious laws that are in favor of religion. We can look towards old communist states to see what happens when we install laws repressing religion. And then we have the historical look in the West of what Christian nations were like and the laws that they had and what sort of repression they imposed. So none of it ever ends well. So I am just against religious laws altogether, both repressing religion and supporting religion. I personally would like to see the religious battle fought and won in the marketplace of ideas. Let's beat people with our arguments. Let's beat people with our intellect. Let's not beat them through force and repression, which has historically been a religious tactic of going against anybody, whether they be atheist or another religion. It's a way of keeping them down. Historically been a religious tactic, and I don't want to see secularists and atheists falling into that trap. And that brings us to the final story of today, which involves Trump and drone strikes. And what this is saying is that President Trump is on track. In his first 9 months, he has almost surpassed the amount of civilian casualties during drone strikes that President Obama had in his entire 8 years in office. And what this says is that former President Obama earned the nickname of Drone King when he dramatically escalated the use of drone strikes, while he also downplayed the number of innocent civilians who became collateral damage. In the 2 years that his administration devoted to publicly spending millions of taxpayers' dollars to fight the Islamic State group, the estimated civilian death toll ranged from 2,300 to 3,400, according to Air Wars, an organization tracking deaths in the war against ISIS. President Trump has been in office for just 9 months and has already surpassed Obama's murderous record with estimated numbers as high as 4,500 civilian deaths. Trump made the headlines in December 2015 when he declared that if elected, he would not only kill members of ISIS, he would also, quote, take out their families, end quote. He is following through on that promise, according to a report when Stephen Fieldstein, former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. Fieldstein notes that the research has been documented the rise of, quote, a frequent killing of entire families in likely coalition airstrikes under the Trump administration. This trend led to the deaths of at least 57 women and 52 children in Iraq and Syria in May. According to a report from the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, documenting civilian casualties during the first half of 2017, aerial operations led to a 43% increase in civilian casualties compared to the first 6 months of 2016, including a 67% increase in civilian deaths. Trump's administration has substantially escalated airstrikes and bombings, and the U.S. military has already used 20% more missiles and bombs in combination air operations in 2017 than in all of 2016. Obama surpassed Bush's record, and now Trump has surpassed Obama's record. U.S. has dropped 2,400 bombs in Afghanistan, up from 1,337 last year in the fight against ISIS in Iraq and Syria. The U.S. has already dropped 32,800 bombs compared to 30,743 in 2016. And the U.S. has also conducted more than 100 strikes against Al-Qaeda in Yemen in 2017 compared to 38 in 2016. There have been at least 472 civilians killed by U.S. airstrikes from May 23rd to June 23rd, but from 28 to 88 civilians have been killed in Afghanistan, according to the Bureau of Investigative Journalism and Air Wars, which tracks intentional airstrikes. Air Wars estimates the U.S.-led airstrike killed 1,060 civilians in Iraq and Syria in August 2017, compared to 138 in August 2016. In its worst month, March 2017, it's estimated that Trump administration killed 1,881. The Pentagon admits in May that a single airstrike in Mosul, Iraq, was responsible for 100 of those deaths. In contrast, President Barack Obama's bloodiest month, July 2016, claimed the lives of 312, according to Air Wars. Terrorist groups use U.S. airstrikes to frame Americans as immoral bullies who care less about ordinary people than Al-Qaeda does. The United States is losing the war of perception, a key part of any counterterrorism campaign. In that sense, Trump's bombs could be backfiring. While we do need a heavy hand with dealing with our enemies, this is going way too far, because now you actually really are targeting the families of these terrorists. A lot of people, including myself, were not taking, I suppose we didn't take Trump literally when he said that, but I guess he was a lot more literal than we think. Either that or he just doesn't give a shit. This really is due to the fact that he's handed over the war really to his generals, and he's a lot more hands off on this. So he's letting them do the strikes, and because not much oversight's going on, it seems that a lot of civilians are being killed in this. The problem with this is you require the people's support in order to win the war. If you beat the enemy army and take over the nation, if you don't have the support of the people, it's only a matter of time till revolt happens. I mean, historically, people do not take oppression well, and it's only a matter of time till something will overthrow the oppressor. But really, in this day and age, what America and the rest of the West needs to do is they need to get the individuals on their side, because doing these sort of bombings is what escalates these sort of terroristic groups. It escalates because when they do bombings like this and dozens of people die, well then suddenly ISIS or the Taliban or Al-Qaeda or any one of these other Islamic groups seems like they're actually fighting the true enemy, the one who is killing them. So people join them, people support them, and these are the people that end up feeding in and become the main grunt, the main soldiers for these extremist groups. So we're not helping anybody when we actually do this. It may seem like we're helping, but in the end, we're really just replacing their soldiers with future soldiers, and the cycle continues as it has for something the last 30 years. And eventually what ends up happening is you do have a group such as ISIS, which claims in one of their own magazines that they are not going to stop fighting the West, even if they stop their bombing runs and leave their countries. They said full out that they will focus on their more immediate threats, immediate problems, but once those are dealt with, then they will return to attack the West, attack America or any other country. This is what ends up happening. And you get people who are inspired by these. And we're starting to see, as terrorism is changing, people like ISIS are starting now to branch out online to get their message out and get people radicalized. So now they can touch people all across the world. The danger is no longer just terrorists inside of the attacking country. Now the terrorists are radicalizing people in your own country. So people in America or other Western countries are getting radicalized, and they're doing the bidding of this terrorist group. So as this warfare changes, as terrorism changes, we need to update the way we're doing it. And these drone strikes are not accurate, and they're killing a lot more civilians than they are the bad guys. There's many times when there's no bad guy present. They'll bomb a wedding or something, or a funeral, but none of the bad guys are present, and then we just have a bunch of dead bodies on our hand who are just there to either have a good day and celebrate their wedding, or trying to honor their dead. The other ironic thing is that Trump, during the election run, he criticized Hillary Clinton as a war hawk, which without a doubt she was. She full out stated that she would be starting a war if she became president. So she was without a doubt a war hawk, but Trump is proving himself to be no better than she is, no better than the establishment candidate. So if President Trump keeps going down this direction, his legacy is going to be as the butcher president instead of the legacy in which he made America great again. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is just my stupid opinion. I'll see you guys soon. You